Chinchou, the angler Pokemon. Welcome everyone, I'm exceptional and I hope you are too. In this video I will be playing through Pokemon FireRed including the Round 2 Elite Four, using a single Chinchou that I will allow to evolve into Lantern at level 27. When I first chose the Chinchou line for this video, it was with the intent of doing a reasonably straightforward run. Boy was I wrong. In the early game, usually the biggest problem is the first gym leader, Brock. Naturally, when I'm pondering a Pokemon, my first thought is, how will Brock go? And I actually ended up restarting this run twice. Brock is no issue at all, but what I didn't consider is how challenging every other trainer in the early game would be. Then, in Cerulean, we're faced with two main progression options, Rival 2 or Misty. But what happens when they both wall a Pokemon from progressing? From my incredibly frustrating learning experience, I decided that I needed to face every single trainer in the early game, with the exception of Rival 1.5, because Bulbasaur with Vine Whip is just too much to deal with at this stage of the game. Yeah, you heard that right. Bulbasaur with Vine Whip has Chinchou and I scurrying away with our lures between our fins. In fact, after an inconsistent fight in Professor Oak's lab for the entirety of Viridian Forest, I will save before every single encounter. An early poison status effect in any of these battles is far more than Chinchou can handle at this point. Much of this boils down to Chinchou's base stats and early game move pool. For stats, Chinchou has pretty equivalent stats to the Kanto starters that I played with recently. Moderate special and speed stats with low physical stats and great HP. Obviously, once Chinchou evolves into Lantern, we get boosts to our stats across the board with the exception of speed, but it isn't like Chinchou is a total flop. So, what makes the early game so challenging? Well, as you can see on my shiny new overlay that I built, we start with Bubble, Thunderwave, and Supersonic. We learn Flail at level 13, which we will see some situational use out of, but it doesn't help us at all before Brock. Our only offensive option is Bubble, a 20 base power water move that won't do much damage. Meanwhile, our physical defense is lacking, and most opponents in the early game are dealing physical damage, so we're going to be taking a lot more over time. Kinda sounds like a recipe for disaster, eh? It kinda was. To the point where this Brock fight is so trivial that I'm barely giving it any screen time next to Bugcatcher Rick, the first battle in Viridian Forest. Despite Bubble's weak power, it's still 4 times effective against Brock's Pokemon, so we take an easy gym badge, but funny enough, if he hadn't been a mandatory fight, I would have fought him anyway for the easy experience. Another trend that I noticed in the early game is that typically after Brock you can take a breath and not worry much until Cerulean City. Not today. I continue along defeating every single trainer and saving before every fight. I found out the hard way that Chinchou can easily be knocked out by all of these trainers. In Mount Moon I continue clearing every trainer, and at level 17 Sparky gets its first real moveset upgrade in Water Gun. This is still only a base 40 power move, but it effectively doubles our damage output. We're getting our foundation built, but as I found out before, Chinchou still needs some work before we can really get some progress happening. Once we're in Cerulean, both Rival 2 and Misty are brutal fights for Chinchou. Against the Rival, we lack enough damage and sustain to effectively be able to take out Pidgeotto and Bulbasaur, especially the Bulbasaur, and if by some miracle of luck we survive them, Rattata comes out and cleans us up. Against Misty, we also lack the damage output required, and with her Staryu knowing Recover and being backed up by Super Potions, we can't even take it down, let alone the much more powerful Starmie. Our solution, unfortunately, is to grind levels in the grass outside of Cerulean. The reason that I reset this run twice in the first 20 or so minutes was to avoid this, but just like Thanos, it's inevitable. After a solid few minutes of grinding, Chinchou reaches level 23, which, by the way, still made little to no difference in both battles, but if I use the 2 rare candies that I've collected to this point, it brings Chinchou to level 25. Chinchou learns how to Spark at level 25, and yeah, just like that, Misty is now a completely trivial fight. To the point where Chinchou can now, with a good damage range, one-shot the Starmie. I think I actually spent more time rearranging my moves than actually battling her in this segment. I immediately teach Water Pulse to Chinchou and come back to the Rival fight. Pidgeotto is now a clean one-shot with Spark, and with our powered-up moveset, I'd say we're definitely more effective against the Bulbasaur. It still resists both of our primary attacking moves, but with some parafusion shenanigans, it falls with Chinchou still at full health. Rival 2's remaining Rattata and Abra are easy one-shots as I sit here with a triumphant smile on my face. Both of these fights went from darn near impossible to being nearly trivial. That was a hump and a half to get past, but spoiler alert, we don't find another one for quite a long time. I'm bringing us back in just past Nugget Bridge as we level up to 27, allowing Chinchou to evolve into Lantern. I may have missed the mark on transitioning my overlays, so in 3, 2, 2.5, 1... There. Wait, I'm gonna pull the footage back for one quick second. I want to watch that again. Awesome, I did good. Honestly though, Lantern with Stab, Water Pulse, and Spark at this point in the game is super powerful. I make my way to the SSN where I make a quick dip downstairs to grab TM44 Rest, just in case for later. Rival 3 is the last potentially scary fight for a while, but we do have a lot more bulk and damage output now. Ivysaur was almost scary? Well, not really, I guess. Let's go check out Surge. I want to take a quick moment to discuss the information that's now displayed at the bottom of the screen. We'll start with my nature, Modest. This nature is plus special attack and minus attack, which seemed like the obvious choice for Lantern as we're only going to be attacking with special moves. For the Surge battle, this is I think one of 2 times when our ability Volt Absorb is relevant. With it, whenever we're hit with an electric move, we not only take no damage but heal for a quarter of our max HP. It's a shame that this ability will only really have 2 useful points throughout the run that I can think of. Oh, yeah, and Surge is out of here. My plan for the mid-game is as follows. Get Ice Beam, get Surf, eventually get Thunderbolt, melt everything in between. This means that I have to get 160,000 Pokédollars. I end up making a bit of a whoopsie in this run and automatically start buying vitamins, but it ends up being fine. With these additions to our moveset over time, there really isn't anything in the mid-game that will stand in our way. I defeat all of the trainers in Pokemon Tower for the special attack EVs after defeating Rival 4. We still don't have an effective move against Ivysaur, but a side effect of FireRed is the amount of required trainers and random spinners that hit me along the way, so you're always going to be over-leveled in this section of the game. Next I jump into Sylph, collecting all of the vitamins, high-value items, and TMs to sell. I don't bother attempting Rival 5 yet, as I don't have Ice Beam and I'd rather grab that first. Speaking of which, I grab Ice Beam. I teach it immediately to Lantern and head over to Erica's gym. In here, I'm not facing every trainer. I'm targeting trainers with the Bulbasaur and Oddish lines as they give special attack EVs. Channeling my inner Percival Frederickstein von Musel Kowalski Dorolo III, Bellsprout is the luckiest Pokemon in the gym today. It isn't on my list. Erica, of course, falls to 3 well-placed Ice Beams. Boy, that was a random and slightly obscure reference. Let me know in the comments if you know that one without searching Google. If you answered yes, we're now best friends. Next we head to Fuchsia, where after we clear the Safari Zone and get access to another big moveset upgrade in Surf, we come to mess up Koga's day. I had a Pecha Berry equipped because it's just such a habit at this point, but it makes no difference. Weezing ends up taking 3 hits after a heal, but that's about as interesting as this battle got. We're going to come back to Sylph and Rival 5 as Lantern continues going through the mid-game with cruise control set. I have a Chesto Berry equipped, again for safety, but the most threatening thing that Venusaur does is make me smell better? Okay. The rest of Rival 5's Pokemon all fall with easy one-shots. Lantern has been a force to be reckoned with once we got past Misty and Cerulean. I love that this is the case because it allows so much flexibility in my routing in the follow-up playthrough. I clear all of the trainers in Sabrina's gym mostly for the EVs, but also some experience. Lantern is part of the medium fast growth rate, so earlier in the game it actually levels slower than Pokemon like Squirtle in the medium slow growth group, interestingly enough. But now that we're past the mid-40s, the curve has shifted, so now Lantern is leveling up faster. To nobody's surprise, I made a spreadsheet to confirm this. Oh, yeah, we've been battling Sabrina this whole time, and she doesn't really pose much of a threat to us either. I carry on heading towards Cinnabar Island. I skip every trainer outside of the gym in case I need them later for experience, but clear all of the trainers in Blaine's gym. This is one of the last nice areas for special attack EVs, good XP yields, and decent money actually. I defeat them all because once you defeat a gym leader, every trainer in that gym becomes inert and cannot be battled. Is anybody else surprised that our water types just swept Blaine? No? Let's move on. I have to apologize for jumping from major battle to major battle with nothing in between, but I had to show something while I talked through my thinking up to this point. After getting over the early game hump, the only Pokemon Lantern doesn't one-shot are in the gyms. Even they don't stand much of a chance. Giovanni is another series of one-shot KOs. Now we're at Rival 6, the gatekeeper between us and the League. This fight has caused some issues for Pokemon in the past, and as always, it's a nice sneak peek for what the champion team is going to feel like. Venusaur takes Lantern down into low red bar, and I thought to myself, well, this one's over, but let's just see how it plays out. I swept through the rest of his team all the way to Alakazam. Okay, this thing has me dead to rights. Unless it uses Future Sight twice, and we knock it down with 2 Surfs. Okay. After seeing the range on the Venusaur, I'll come back to this fight at level 55 next time, but that's all I needed to know. And here we are in the league. Lorelei kicks us off, and without any additional leveling, I want to see how Lantern does. Dugong is an easy 2-shot while it sets up Hail, bringing us to Cloyster. Experience tells me that this thing's going to waste my time first turn, so I Thunder Wave and then take it out with a follow-up Spark. Yeah, that move is still carrying us. Slowbro is next, and because of this thing's love of amnesia, I set up a Thunder Wave against it just to cut its consistency. But with how much damage Spark is doing, that may have been a bit too safe. Jinx ends up being the one who I struggle with most so far, but only because it took 3 shots instead of 2. 5 with the heal. Lapras comes out, and I was so worried after my second Spark that Lorelei was going to use a full restore. Instead, though, it triggers Lapras' Citrus Berry, we outspeed, and 1 more Spark gets the job done. Right on, Lantern, starting the league strong and only at level 55 after the Lorelei fight. Bruno is next, and definitely more concerning than Lorelei. Wow, that's a sentence I never thought I'd say. The Generation 3 AI will prioritize sending out Pokemon that have super effective moves against us. What the AI doesn't account for is that Onix equals Surf Fodder. We come to Hitmonchan, and I don't really know what to do here. I Thunder Wave for safety and then take it down with 2 Surfs. Hitmonlee comes out and misses Mega Kick, so it's knocked out consequence-free as well. The Ace Machamp is last, and I definitely want to paralyze this thing. I realize that I got a little lucky in this battle with misses and the opponents being fully paralyzed, but wow. Lantern defeats Bruno with full health. Against Agatha, I have to be prepared for her lottery. She starts by firing off a Toxic, which if the Weedles in Viridian Forest taught us anything is bad news for Lantern. This ends up being the case as after we take out the Gengar, Golbat comes out and combined with the poison damage, finishes off Lantern. We take our first reset in a very, very long time. I end up wiping again, so in this battle I finally bust out TM10 Hidden Power. I chose Psychic on this run because I honestly had no idea what else might be useful. What follows though is a Karmic Balance getting us back after that Bruno fight. I hit myself in confusion not once, not twice, but 4 times taking another reset. HP Psychic doesn't even one-shot the Gengar, so I really don't think this move is useful today. I know I could have equipped a Pecha Berry here to avoid the poison, but I really wanted to keep my Chesto Berry because I know how badly being asleep can mess you up in this fight. Thankfully, in this battle, I managed to get by the first few Pokemon and to the final Gengar without being poisoned. It puts Lantern to sleep, which is cancelled immediately by our Chesto Berry. Booyah! The Ace Gengar falls to a crit Surf. Agatha sends out Haunter last, and I actually got a nice laugh out of this one. I didn't know that this Haunter knew Curse. That move could cause some real problems for other Pokemon in the future, but today, I Surf, and Haunter uses Curse, knocking itself out. A fitting end to the lottery that is Agatha. The Dragon Master Lance is the penultimate battle for round 1. Gyarados is obviously a one-shot with 4 times effective Spark, but to my surprise the Dragonairs are not one-shots with Ice Beam. The first one gets frozen, immediately thaws, and strikes with Outrage for not a lot of damage. The second one, though, survives and hits us with a Thunder Wave. This kind of bothers me as we're now paralyzed, and should our Volts not have absorbed this? Or did it work because it's just a status move? I'm so confused. Anyway, even the Dragonite isn't getting one-shot despite being 4 times weak to Ice Beam. Wait a minute, does Dragonite get Thick Fat? Nope, but that would be sweet. Oh, also I just noticed our level. Yeah, we're 3 levels lower than this thing. Lantern is amazing. Unfortunately, Aerodactyl at 23 hit points while paralyzed isn't happening, and we fall. Well, that's an easy fix, I think. I equip a Cherry Berry, and the first 3 members fall just like last time, except in this battle, I'm not paralyzed, but I seem to be struck by lance. Dragonite only sets up Safeguard, and this time we're back to Aerodactyl in high green bar. It hits with Ancient Power, getting the fabled Omni Boost, which I'm pretty sure saved it from being one-shot by Surf. It hits another AP while we extinguish the fossil. Thankfully, this is still round 1 and it didn't know Earthquake. It's champion time! I wonder if this is where Lantern will finally hit a bit of a wall? Pidgeot falls to an Ice Beam Spark combo, but unfortunately gets a Sand Attack in, lowering our accuracy. Venusaur comes out and I use Surf? Whoops. Alright, well I guess we get to see how much Solar Beam is doing. All. Solar Beam is doing all of our health. In the interest of saving time and my easily bruised ego, I'll jump right ahead to our successful attempt. This is actually our 9th attempt against the champion, leveling up with rare candies incrementally through damage rounding thresholds. This is our first attempt at level 63. Ice Beam is now knocking Pidgeot into heal range, so as long as it doesn't Sand Attack turn 1, we can safely take it down suffering only minimal damage. Venusaur is out and we instantly freeze it. Yeah, that works better than Surf. We have Venusaur in the bag no matter what, as it always seems to use either Growth or Solar Beam, both of which won't do anything to us before we take it down. Rhydon is free with Surf, and Alakazam is out next. It poses a few problems for us as it can add a substantial amount of damage that weakens Lantern over the course of the battle. In this one though, we get a crit with Surf, taking it down while still just above half health. Gyarados is also free with Spark, bringing us to Arcanine. Arcanine will always use Extreme Speed against us, as its next best option is Bite. We take down Arcanine with a single Surf, and there goes the battle. The Chinchou line has been a really wild ride so far. We started off extremely slow, but after that it wasn't until the 3rd member of the Elite Four that we had something that could actually stand up against us. Lantern clocks in with a round 1 time of 1 hour, 49 minutes, 51 seconds at level 64 with 22 resets. This took 6 hours and 9 minutes of game time. Pretty good, but our real challenge lies ahead. As usual, I'm only interested in the round 2 Elite Four, so I'll jump straight ahead to them, as the scariest thing we face in between is a level 54 Weezing. Which is only, scary because we might not one-shot it. We'll jump ahead 20 minutes on the clock, and here we are at the round 2 Elite Four. I take a second to admire Lantern before jumping in, now at level 68, sporting a lovely set of leftovers and this season's style moveset of Surf, Ice Beam, Thunderbolt, and you best believe its substitute. Lorelei's upgraded team is actually a substantial improvement from her round 1 team. Today though, Lantern is not phased. We didn't struggle at all with her in round 1, and in round 2 it's no different. It's so straightforward in fact that I'm just blabbing away over footage of Lantern setting up a sub and systematically taking apart her entire team. I'd love to imagine Lantern's sub looks like a little plushie with some attitude, all like, I'm right here, come get it! Bruno gets more of a moveset upgrade on his team than a team overhaul. This time though, it's Hitmonlee that comes out second because it now knows Earthquake. Lantern takes it down, but Hitmonlee dropped us all the way below 30% health. Machamp is next and sends Lantern packing with a big cross chop. Having a low defense stat is definitely hurting our cause here. In the next fight, I decide to go all in on the Hitmonlee. Setting up a sub is clearly not going to work against it. We take it down with less than half going into the Machamp. The odds are in our favor this time as Machamp misses a cross chop, followed by Lantern landing a crit Ice Beam. I was going for the freeze here, but hey, I'll take a KO instead. Steeliz, or Steelix as some people know him, apparently not because that's what I have written in my script, is free with Surf, and the Hitmonchan, despite being able to do some fairly substantial damage to us, falls to 2 Surfs. A lucky fight, but not so lucky that I feel dirty. Agatha is next, and from experience we know that our little blue lantern bear, at least that's what I'm imagining our sub looks like, pierces deep into her psyche, rendering her first Gengar completely impotent. The Arbok that follows ends up breaking our sub with Earthquake. What? Arbok can learn Earthquake? Cool. It falls to a Surf, but we don't have a sub out. Crobat comes out and I try to set up another sub, but it ends up breaking right before we take it out with Thunderbolt. Her Ace Gengar is next, and I'm not too worried about it for one reason. Volt Absorb. I'm not sure on the exact math here, but since all of her moves hit us for neutral damage, we have a 1 in 4 chance of her using Thunderbolt, which will actually heal Lantern. I try again for substrats, but it seems like that going on the offensive gets the job done. Mischievous is last, and although it knows Thunderbolt, she uses Shadow Ball and crits, but Lantern is mighty, tanks the hit, suffers the poison damage, and takes out Mischievous for the victory. Finally, we find ourselves once again against the Dragon Doctoral Lance. Knowing his Gyarados' playbook in advance helps a lot, so we set up a sub turn 1 avoiding Thunder Wave. Aerodactyl then comes out and fires a nasty Earthquake our way, but our sub absorbs the hit and we take it down with a single Surf. 2 down. The lower level Dragonite comes out and we get a clean one-shot with Ice Beam. I hope we're doing enough to get that same result against the level 72 one, but first we have to deal with Kingdra. Kingdra is an interesting one here, as it knows Surf and Ice Beam, which we resist, so the AI will prioritize Dragon Dance for setup and Hyper Beam. So it must be sitting there thinking it has to set up high enough for Hyper Beam to be worth the recharge turn? Little does it know that on a recharge turn I can simply drop a new sub on the field. My biggest struggle here is actually managing my own damage to avoid putting it into heal ranges before I inevitably misclick and it wipes us. It takes a while, but we do take it down, unfortunately just after our sub was broken. The Ace Dragonite is last, and yup, clean one-shot with Ice Beam. That feels good. We are the same level as the ace of the entire endgame team that we just took out, but the Round 2 champion has bar none the hardest and most diverse team in the entire game. Now, at last, the ultimate challenge in Pokémon FireRed, the Round 2 champion. His upgraded team has been the cause of many a reset for me in the past. Let's see how Lantern stacks up. We start the battle against Heracross, a Pokémon with 125 base attack against our meager 58 base defense. In the first battle, that discrepancy is demonstrated by a decisive decimation of our defensively doughy dude. With it mixing in Rock Tombs, I think our best strategy here is Sub-Pray Love? In the next fight, our strategy is working. Well, working as well as it can. Lantern simply doesn't have the damage output against this thing, as it actually has more special defense than we do. It's a slugfest, but Lantern eventually takes it down with under a third HP. Tyranitar comes out and wow, we don't one-shot it either. That's going to be a problem. For funsies, I decided to run the damage calcs on how much damage its Earthquake is doing to us. Around 70%. That's a hit we can't afford to take. I'll spare you some of me banging my head against this wall. I decide to level up to 75 with rare candies, and here's what I know so far after a few resets. Heracross is pretty much pure luck. If it uses Rock Tomb, we're okay. If it uses anything else, we have to resub, resulting in a net loss of HP for every turn that happens. Based on the ranges that I'm seeing here, I'm probably going to need to level up to 78 over the next damage rounding threshold, as getting a 2-shot here adds consistency. I simply don't have the ability to roll the dice this many times against Heracross. If I do manage to take it down, it's pretty much a requirement that I'm behind a sub coming into Tyranitar, because yeah, it destroys us. I don't know anything else, as in the last 4 resets at this point. That's as far as I've made it. Alright, let's see how things go at 78. Rock Tomb first turn, good, and then a missed Rock Tomb? At level 78 we also get the 2-shot against it. Heck yeah, this is the best result so far. We still don't one-shot Tyranitar, but we are now outspeeding. Barely. But it doesn't matter if you outspeed by an inch or a mile. Outspeeding is outspeeding. Our higher damage also allows us to knock it into heal range, so all it manages to do is set up Gross Weather and break our sub. We're moving on with nearly full HP. Gyarados falls to a single Thunderbolt, and out comes Venusaur. Ice Beam is doing over half as it clears that awful weather for us, letting the sun shine in. Venusaur goes down, and after we heal from our held leftovers, Lantern is at 312 out of 314 hit points going into Alakazam. Wow! Calm Mind is bad. Bad. As its moves are getting stronger and stronger, ours will be doing less and less damage. Alakazam hits Lantern on turn 3 for a massive Psychic. 215 HP lost instantly. I keep going for Thunderbolts though, hoping for damage ranges, crits, paralysis, anything. Please, we're so close! It hits and Alakazam falls. Arcanine comes right out as the sun fades, which is absolutely perfect for us. Our Surf will now do full damage, and its fire moves aren't powered up. It hits an extreme speed, bringing Lantern into low red bar. We fire back Surf, and it's done! We did it! That last battle was so intense that I was shaking by the end of it. My adrenaline was through the roof. I still feel like that fight wasn't particularly consistent though, and I know that this is going to require some serious testing before playthrough 2. Lantern clocks in with a round 2 time of 2 hours, 29 minutes, and 22 seconds at level 78 with 33 resets, 11 of which were from round 2. This took 7 hours and 56 minutes of game time. This is actually my best first run to date, but you best believe my mind is already whirring away finding improvements. Seeing how both leagues played out, I think I'm going to make some fairly major changes in my next run. Alrighty then, coming into the second playthrough, I couldn't help but laugh as we get our first 5 resets in Viridian Forest. I was tempted to reset the run, but this is just the nature of Chinchou in the early game. RNG Heavy Survival. Bug Catcher Rick. I'll remember the name. Moving right along to Cerulean, because Brock managed to do a whole 4 points of damage to us, we come to the end of the grind against wild Pokemon. I use my 2 rare candies, learn Spark, and I don't even bother healing at a Poké Center before starting the Misty battle. We know from last run that Spark equals win. Rival 2 is also just like last run, a complete wall until we upgrade our moveset and then becomes quite straightforward. Bulbasaur can still be a little scary, but I feel like we have some pretty good control in this fight. What? I is evolving? Of course I have to pause a moment for my own edification. Hehehehe, that's so fun. Okay, we're moving on. Alright, so I'm not going to show much of the rest of the game until closer to the Elite Four. We already know that Lantern powers through the entirety of the mid-game. Instead, I'll quickly go over a few changes that I made. I'm doing all of my usual chores because with a few extra ethers throughout the mid-game, we can avoid a lot of Poké Center trips actually. My top priority is getting Ice Beam followed by Thunderbolt in the game corner. As an effect of that, I'm skipping buying vitamins until later, so I target the Rocket Hideout, Pokemon Tower, then Sylph in that order. The keen among you may have noticed that I only have a single Meowth this run. I didn't spend the time catching my typical army of Meowths because TM10 Hidden Power just wasn't that useful for us. Ironically, with this one Meowth that I use for Cut and Dig, I end up getting 3 copies of TM10. This is such a random run, I love-hate it. After collecting all of the valuable items in Sylph, I jump over to Celadon, sell what we don't need in order to get Ice Beam. I then frost Erica's Flakes, and instead of going to Fuchsia this time, I actually go back to Sylph to take on Rival 5. The big bad Rival 5 is quite easy with this moveset, so I want to explain why I came here instead of going to Fuchsia. Clearing this out and grabbing Lapras now allows us not to have to backtrack to Fuchsia later for the rare candy in the Warden's house, which I do want. Lapras is my strength and surf cheerleader, and in round 2 it can also learn HM6 Rock Smash, which isn't useful for plot progression, but also HM7 Waterfall, which is required. Lapras is the perfect cheerleader with a full moveset of 4 HM moves. I defeat Sabrina, Koga, and then Blaine, and find myself back in Celadon to buy TM24 Thunderbolt. You may have noticed that as I teach Thunderbolt to Lantern, I don't have Surf on my moveset. I decided actually to not teach it this time, as I found it was restricting my moveset too much in the Elite Four. As an HM move, you can't delete it by yourself, you have to go to a move deleter. Lantern can get by with only Water Pulse just fine. Did you catch it? The jump and the timer from that flight? Spearow must have been delayed due to insert airline excuse here. Or I just cut out Giovanni's entire gym because, well, I'm sure you know how that went. I heal up really quickly and head towards Rival 6 and then the Pokemon League. Rival 6 remains no problem for Lantern. We're a slightly higher level, and with our upgraded moveset this time including Substitute, he stands no chance against us. Yes, even without Leftovers, Substitute is still an incredibly powerful move in this generation. Something tells me that we're going to see a lot of it in future runs. We find ourselves at the league doors with just over an hour and a half on the clock. Despite the very tedious early game, Lantern has made up some serious time. I have a confession to make here. I didn't do any testing against Lorelei. All of my encounters with her have been so straightforward to Lantern that even when I play like a dolt, we will make it through. You'll see what I mean in round 2. In round 1 though, an easy victory. The worst thing she did here was double protect on Cloyster, wasting an extra power point of Thunderbolt. Bruno is also very straightforward. I set up a sub against Onyx tanking a Rock Tomb with room to spare. Onyx 2 falls, and Hitmonchan manages to hit a second Rock Tomb, which still hasn't broken our initial sub. Hitmonlee finally breaks the sub thinking that it was a brick. It falls and I go all in on the Machamp. Even with a bulk up, I don't think he had the damage output to take us down. Maybe with a crit, but he missed, and so I win. Next we follow the golden rule that substrats are greater than Agatha. Well, not every time as I show here. Lantern takes a little bit too much damage and then the Ace Gengar puts us to sleep and ends up finishing us off. Agatha really loves breaking our no reset streak. This is an easy fix with a Chesto Berry though, which I put on replacing a Persim Berry? I honestly can't remember what that Persim Berry was equipped for. Maybe even as far back as Misty? Lantern fried the mid-game. This time when the Ace Gengar puts us to sleep, our Chesto activates, we re-establish our sub, and that's all Lantern needed to secure another victory. Lance isn't particularly threatening either. I establish a sub against Gyarados, who can't knock it down with Dragon Rage. I then sweep through Gyarados and the two Dragonairs. Dragonite actually survives our Ice Beam with a sliver, but locks itself into Outrage so Lance can't heal. It breaks our sub and Lantern breaks Dragonite. Aerodactyl tickles us with an Ancient Power and then falls to a Thunderbolt. Champion time, and I have to admit I'm a little disappointed in myself here. Even with my notes open in front of me, I was so hot-headed about how awesome Lantern was doing that I didn't read the R1 champ at 6-3 note, resulting in a couple of resets. With the favorable ranges leveling up over 2 damage rounding thresholds, this gives us the battle no problem. Oh, and I know that Water Pulse would have been doing more damage against Arcanine, but I didn't want to knock it into heal range. Gotta save those seconds. Lantern clocks in with a round 1 time of 1 hour, 43 minutes, 23 seconds at level 64 with 12 resets. This took 6 hours and 10 minutes of game time. The majority of these resets actually came when we were still a Chinchou in the early game. So much inconsistency. We pop right back in at the gates of the Round 2 Elite Four after clearing the Sevi Island questline. Time to see if our preparation and planning worked out for us. Let's do it. Before I initiate the Lorelei fight, I teach Lantern the final move for our endgame moveset, TM45 Attract, which can be picked up just northwest of Nugget Bridge. It is critical that on this run we had a female Lantern for this league. Remember how I said that I played like a dolt here and still won? Dugong falls to a single Thunderbolt and out comes Piloswine. Because I didn't set up a sub against Dugong and I decide for some reason to go for Attract, it hits 2 massive Earthquakes, both doing slightly over half our health. If not for leftovers, we would have been toast. Cloyster gets one shot, and then once again because of leftovers, we've healed enough coming into Jinx that after she fires off a Psychic, we survive with 7 hit points. Then, Lapras comes out and uses Surf, and the healing from leftovers saves us for a 3rd time, with Lantern hanging on at 8 hit points. This is about 0.25% of our max HP. Lorelei does the healing dance with us, but Lantern succeeds in taking down the Lapras, finally. I wipe the drool from my lips, shake it off, and get my head back in the game for the rest of the league. Bruno 2 is still very threatening, but with the addition of Attract on our side, he becomes mildly consistent. We can still lose easily here with some bad luck, but between subs, leftovers, and them having a 50% chance of being immobilized by love, we can prevail most of the time. I discovered in my testing that re-establishing subs and waiting for them to be immobilized is the best way through. Taking a quarter damage setting up a substitute is way better than well over half from any of his team members' Earthquakes. Machamp crits turn 1 with Earthquake, proving my point. If I hadn't been behind a sub, that would have been curtains right there. I bide my time, and as you can see, it's not a perfect strategy, but stalling in this manner gives me brief windows of opportunity that I can then capitalize on. After Machamp falls, out comes Steelix 2. I entered the league at level 75 because this allows Lantern a pretty favorable range for a 2-shot here. I skip the fuss as we're back at a comfortable level of health, and fire off 2 Ice Beams while Steelix Earthquakes breaking our sub. Hitmonchan is last, and although it can do some decent damage against us, it's the only Pokemon on Bruno's team that doesn't know Earthquake. From this amount of health, I know I can outdamage it by a margin, so we take it down in 2 Thunderbolts with it only landing a single Sky Uppercut. While grinding in the grass in the early game this time, I made sure to only fight Spearows and Rattatas for speed EVs. This allows us in this fight to outspeed the first Gengar so we can establish a substitute early. This allows us to take it down without any fuss. Against the Arbok, I paused for a moment, and I actually elect to use attract strategies as I want to maintain my sub, and then I take it down. Crobat gets one-shot by Thunderbolt after outspeeding and failing a Confuse Ray. That is exactly why I wanted the sub up. The Ace Gengar is out and heals us with a Thunderbolt. Gotta love Volt Absorb. To my surprise, on the next turn it hits a Psychic, which actually doesn't do enough to break our sub. Sweet! Mischievous is last and uses our own tactics against us. It attracts us. It didn't happen here because I only needed to hit it twice, but during my testing I attracted it right back, and for 2 turns Mischievous and Lantern sat there just making doe eyes at each other. Hilarious. The only inconsistency in the Dr. Lance fight was Kingdra. As always, I established a sub, dodging a Thunder Wave from Gyarados. I then one-shot it, and the Aerodactyl, and then the lower level Dragonite. Kingdra is out next, and I use Attract turn 1, cutting its consistency. I set up a sub while it sets up Dragon Dance, and then unfortunately, as I go for the KO, it outspeeds and hits a Hyper Beam, breaking our sub for the Ace Dragonite. The power of love made that way better than last time. Unfortunately for Lance, Dragonite can't stand up to a 4-time super effective Ice Beam, so it falls. I take a quick moment here double-checking everything about Lantern before heading into the champion room. Alright, I'm gonna preface this by saying that I did a lot of testing here. A lot. The most time-efficient way that I could find was this strategy at level 78, but this is incredibly luck-based. In my testing, I won around half of the battles, so I am expecting to reset here a few times. Alright, pause for one quick second. Let's take a look at the timer. Our first round 2 champion battle starts, and we have 2 hours, 7 minutes, and 23 seconds on the clock. Let's remember that number. Being at level 78 allows us a fairly good chance at 2-shotting the Heracross. Our strategy against it is hope that it uses Rock Tomb or Counter, or that it's immobilized by Love. Just like in the Bruno fight, it's more advantageous to stall a bit and keep a sub up, as eventually it will be immobilized. Our sub can rarely tank up to 3 Rock Tombs, usually only 2 though, and this keeps our speed stat intact, which is vital. Tyranitar comes out, and it's the same story here, except that it will always use Earthquake unless it sees a KO with another move, so we are rolling the dice every turn hoping that it's immobilized. Not having Surf here is what makes Tyranitar so much harder, but that first playthrough victory was incredibly lucky, and using the same strategy just didn't work without a ton of leveling up. We get a freeze here, allowing us to take it down, but because of Sandstorm we have no healing and our health is looking very dire. Gyarados is free with Thunderbolt, and what I discovered in my testing is that every time we come to Venusaur with less than around 100 health, it uses its own Earthquake, taking us down. I need better luck against the Tyranitar. Sometimes though, Heracross also misbehaves and we enter a death spiral. As our health gets lower, Heracross is more and more likely to see a KO range with Earthquake, making it more likely to use it. And remember, both Heracross and Tyranitar both have a 50% chance to not move at all with Attract, which just doesn't seem to be happening. I make it to Venusaur fairly consistently, but our health is so low after Tyranitar and Heracross that even after some excellent luck against Venusaur, it doesn't matter. As Alakazam comes out, I say, "Rut-row, Reggie," and it takes us down with a single Psychic. Keeping in mind that I only need 3 good turns against Tyranitar to succeed, which 3 in a row is about a 1 in 8 chance, and I end up resetting here more than 8 times. I hit a point where I realized that if my health was below 100-ish, the fight wasn't worth continuing, and I just reset, so it wouldn't cost more time. Let me take a second to reflect on all of the luck that's working against us in these battles. Under the effects of Attract, the opponents have a 50% chance to be immobilized each turn. I'm using Ice Beam and Thunderbolt, both of which have a 10% chance to either freeze or paralyze respectively. None of this is lining up the way we need it to right now. Okay, so after way too many resets, we find ourselves in this attempt. Please admire the fact that I have been resetting here for over 10 minutes. Heracross is behaving as well as can be expected in this fight. We end up missing the range, so the champ uses a full restore while I re-establish our sub. We're essentially net zero in this fight, but with the perk that Heracross is already attracted to Lantern. 2 more Thunderbolts, including a crit, do finish the job. We face off against the bane of our existence to this point, Tyranitar, as he's had ridiculously good luck hitting through Attract. Instead, on this fight though, we get a freeze turn 1 with Ice Beam. You can actually see my hesitation as I'm processing exactly how to handle this, because this situation is darn near perfection and I don't want to mess it up. We take down the Tyranitar without it using a single move. Venusaur comes out, and this is what makes this strategy work. All I needed this whole time was to get to this point with half health or higher. At that range, Venusaur wants to use Solar Beam against us, so it sets up the sun, cancelling that darn Sandstorm. At this level, we do over half to Venusaur with Ice Beam, so when its Citrus Berry triggers, it's out of heal range, but still in KO range. We knock it down with a sub-up, and after recovery, 310 out of 314 HP going into Alakazam. Lanturn is all about subs and love, so we continue using our tactics against Alakazam. It starts setting up Calm Mind as we hit the first Thunderbolt, and unfortunately we get the 10% chance of paralyzing. Why now? Alakazam's ability Synchronize then paralyzes us. Uh-oh. My next Thunderbolt puts Alakazam into heal range, so now we're paralyzed, and it's at full health, not paralyzed, and set up to +1 in special attack and special defense. On that same turn, our Thunderbolt brings it back down just over half. I cannot express how amped up I was at this point. It is a good thing that I'm not including any live audio for this whole Round 2 champion ordeal, or I'd have had to put this video's rating to mature. The paralysis ends up cutting our consistency just enough that the champion spams out more full restores and Alakazam takes us down. Come on. Alright you, I's had enough of your shenanigans. We end up getting the luck we need in the next fight and find ourselves back at the Alakazam in a similar situation to last time. The sunlight fades as we slug it out back and forth with the Psy Pokemon. I get better damage ranges, which are ironically lower, so it doesn't go into heal range. Alakazam breaks our sub with Psychic and Lanturn takes it down. Here we go. Arcanine is out, and with Lanturn at full health, I'm not worried at all here. 2 Thunderbolts finish the fight, and Lanturn has finally defeated the Round 2 champion. My goodness. I am floored at how poorly that champion fight went. I knew it was going to be random, I expected a few resets, but that was asinine. Lanturn clocks in with a Round 2 finish of 2 hours, 22 minutes, and 36 seconds with 22 resets, 10 of which were against the Round 2 champion at level 78. This took 7 hours and 47 minutes of game time. Comparing our results, in Round 1, Lanturn beat the game 6 minutes and 28 seconds faster with 10 less resets and 1 more minute of game time. This isn't overly surprising as I did add a little bit of additional grinding in the later section of Kanto in preparation for the league. In Round 2, we improved by 6 minutes and 46 seconds with 11 less resets and 9 minutes less of game time. In both runs, we did it at the same level. I feel like this really speaks to the intuitive, albeit very random, nature of Lanturn in these games. Incredibly RNG heavy in the early game, then annihilates the rest of the game, almost all the way until the Round 2 champion, where things become, again, incredibly lucky. I feel like there were some minor time saves I could do in my own play, but our results reflect Lanturn fairly well. This is the nature of relying on luck, which despite our terrible luck at the champion, kept us from having to level up to the mid to high 80s. Therefore, it's still a better choice of strategy in my opinion. A small part of me wanted to do another run, but I'd just be fishing for better luck. It could be better, it could be worse. If you've made it to the end of the video, thank you so much. I'm trying my best to continue iterating on my ideas, overlays, editing style, and everything else that goes into making these videos to try and bring you the best content that I possibly can. If you feel like I've earned it, please leave a like and let me know how I'm doing in the comments. As always, the substrats are as effective in-game as they are on YouTube, so if you'd like to keep up with my releases and feel that I deserve it, I would love your support. Until next time, take care everyone.